me for a walk under sycamore trees in the dark trees that blow. Dark trees that blow.
Welcome to Twin Peaks. I'm your host, Ben Durant, and beside me is
Ryan Kazaska, and beside me is
Scott Ryan.
Yeah. Oh, Scott's
the Scott
Ryan! Yay!
Because I thought it was weird that you started that way, because you actually made me sit in between you as a Twin Peaks unwrapped sandwich, and I don't have a lot of room. We're a little closer than I think so that's why I feel a little strange.
Really
I'm the
beside,
bologna in this sandwich.
Yeah, you're like, where do I go?
Scott Ryan, I mean, you are known for the Blue Rose magazine. You've done was it that you did that the Twin Peaks Festival documentary. You've done of course the Red Room podcast and so much more. And you're a good friend of ours, and we've been thankful to be able to put our book, that you published, out to the world. And thank you. But you've got something happening now. You've got a new book. It's based on Fire Walk with Me film, and I can't believe that you have never done a Twin Peaks book before, because it seems like you would have by now. But it's Fire Walk with Me, Your Lord Disappeared.
Yeah, it is crazy, because a couple years ago I was very much into my Letterman promotion, and I was lucky enough to be out in New York City interviewing some Letterman people. And I was saying how I was doing this book, and they were sort of getting my background, and I talked about Twin Peaks, and because they asked, what is your next book going to be? And I said, I don't know. And they said, well, what are you doing? And they said, you got to do a Twin Peaks book. That's your brand. And I said, I don't want to do a Twin Peaks book. I got nothing to say. And then it was sneaking up the 30th anniversary. And this book just sort of came to me. I thought, if I got to do one, because everybody's got one. Yeah. Ben and Brian has one. Brad Dukes has one. Josh Minton has one. John Thorne has one. Courtney Stallings has one. David Bushman has one.
All of our friends. You're the only one. You're the only one of our friends that doesn't have a book.
Yeah.
So I was like, Fire Walk with Me. That was the place for me to do it. And that was my only idea, that the 30th was coming. I did not know what I would write. Every single day that I wrote, I did not know what I was going to write. There was no plan for this book, no outline, nothing. It was a very strange book for me. And I have no idea what the fan community is going to think about it. And the two of you are only the fourth people to ever read the book.
Wow.
Bushman, Lindsay Hallam, who interviewed me for the Red Room, and now you guys. So I just don't know. So I know I'm here to answer questions, but I have a question for you guys. As deep dive fans, what did you guys think of the book?
I finished it yesterday, and like I texted you, Scott, I was just like, I don't really have words to kind of comprehend how I feel about this book. Like I could just say generic things to you, but I was like, I felt like it was a journey. I went on a journey with you, and because I know you, your voice was in my head the whole time. And I felt like we were back when we first met, and you were debating with Bushman about during breakfast. And I felt like you were sitting across the table from me, just telling me your story. That's what I felt like for me. And I thought it was very Scott. And I think that's why I liked it. You had your humor. You got personal with things. You really put your heart on your sleeve with this one, I thought. And I mean, I don't have words other than to say I really, really loved it. And I think the community will find something new from this book. There's a lot of new, interesting things that I never heard before. And I think it's just a fantastic book.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I agree 100% with everything you're saying, Brian. And as a longtime fan of Twin Peaks, back from when it was, originally aired, seeing the movie when it was in theaters, I was so happy that I feel like you touched on everything that I would be interested in, everything I would want to read about, or I would want to make sure would be in a Fire Welcome Me book. You touched on. I mean, you didn't have to spend pages and pages, but you would spend the chapter on the scripts, which I want to go behind the scenes of that. And you touch on, you get these interviews and ask these questions that I want to know about. So you touched on a lot of things. You truly are a fan, and I can see that in your writing, but you also have the experience and knowledge that the things that you need to share with people to get them to understand what the making of this film was all about. So I was going to ask you about this, but you kind of already answered it. But I was going to say, how do these chapters come about? Because you have chapters that feel like almost like an oral history, was something I think Brian and I were trying to do, and Brad Dukes did. And then you have another chapter that digs into these scripts, and then you have interviews, and then you share a lot of your own experience. And it does. I mean, you say you didn't know where it was going, but it felt like it was building onto something, and you really got there to the end, and you had the cherry on the top at the end there. And I really think you did an incredible job with this book. And I think I've got almost every one of your books. Like I joke with you that I should be I should have like a book club. Every time Scott Ryan comes out with a book, I have to make sure I have it, because I have your book on writing and stuff, or publishing and stuff like that. And that's not a Twin Peaks book or your moonlighting book, or there's so many books that I've gotten, but this to me is my favorite of your books that you've written.
Oh,
and maybe I'm biased, of course, because it's Twin Peaks, but it's a great book. I'm really impressed with it.
Oh, thank you so much. I mean, in some ways, I feel like this is the first book I've written, even though by the numbers, it's my 8th book, which is ridiculous. But it's because there are interviews, of course, because I knew people were going to want that. But that is not the focus of this book. Where my other books, I've really tried to let the other people step up and tell the story of Moonlighting or Letterman or 30-something or whatever we're working on. I always am going to interject because Lord knows I have opinions. But in this book, I really share things. And if I wrote any of these chapters on a different day, I don't know if I would have gotten there. Like the story of being in the UCD shop. Should that story make the book? I don't know. I don't know that it should be in the book. But I think what I wanted to show people is how much Twin Peaks has infected my life. It goes everywhere with me. And even down to, I forget what he was now, but the insurance person that comes to my house. Yeah. And then I learn that his aunt is in the movie or something. And everywhere I go, it happens.
Yeah. You were like, okay, let's put it in. Let's check out where his house is, what the person's house is. And then you find out that scene with Bobby and Laura was not filmed in a basement, but a garage.
Scott, there's so many nuggets that you have throughout this book where it's like, I've known about Twin Peaks and Fire Walk Me for 30 years, but I didn't know about that. And that to me always excites me when there's something new that I hadn't known about.
Well, I feel like there is things like that, the fact that that's a garage. Now, on one hand, you could say who cares if that's a garage? But if you're a lifelong Twin Peaks fan and you learn something that you didn't know, it's exciting. And I do feel like there is a lot in this book that has never been told before. And that excites me. But then there's also a lot of pure Scott nonsense as well.
I love the Scott nonsense.
I do too.
I think it's also it doesn't, when you read a Twin Peaks book or anything about theories or whatever, you get bogged down with these theories, but you have some stuff, but you have your sense of humor that kind of lightens the mood, and it feels a little bit more fun. Like you're on a fun journey with you discovering all this stuff. So your personality comes through.
Well, and I don't know how to write any other way. I mean, that's
Yeah.
the problem. Like, I don't know how to bottle this nutbag that I am as a human being. I don't know how, especially if you're talking about Twin Peaks, like you're getting right into the very thing that created my personality anyway.
Very true. Your Laura disappeared. Now, when I saw this title like months ago, when you announced that you told us and I saw the title, first thing I thought was, is Scott trying to trigger people by saying that? Like, I thought, not knowing what this book was going to be about, I thought this was going to be your theory about how Laura Palmer didn't really die. Remember, they changed the history was changed. So I'm thinking, is Scott trying to poke people with this title? Like, that's what my initial reaction was. But then I read that first chapter and I thought it was so clever how you are talking about on a personal level your Laura Palmer, not ours.
Right.
And then I think it goes total full circle for that last chapter with Cheryl Lee, with that wonderful interview. So your journey goes full circle from looking at this person, this character, but now you're kind of friends with the actor, the person. And it's
Right.
like, wow, how far you have come in such a short period.
And people, you know, regular listeners of Twin Peaks Unwrapped, we had you on all the time, and there was always this joke about, you know, interviewing her and getting to meet her and Mr. Lee there, and you know, like, it's crazy in some worlds how far we've come and how far you've come, Scott, to be that, like, wanting to meet her, to now having met her and being able to have regular conversations with her and be able to interview her. And I think that's something special, and that's not something most of us can do. Most of us have podcasts or written books. We can't just get her on the phone and interview. So I think that makes this book extra special too, to get to hear from her.
Well, and I love that you're getting that title. It is sort of interesting because, of course, it's kind of self-centered. You're exactly right. I'm not talking about your Laura. I'm talking about mine.
Yeah.
And what happened to me in that theater on that August day when I'm sitting there months away from earning a college degree that I don't want. You know, I'm at the lowest point in my entire life when I walk into that theater and watch Fire Walk with Me. I mean, I'm just not where I want to be. And there's no, and I'm sitting there thinking there's no path for me in this world. And now I do know Cheryl Lee. Now, I will never say that we're friends because, you know, that's for her to say, not me. She's in charge of that relationship. But she knows who I am. Like, I worked to take me from the person that sat in that theater and thought, there's no hope for me. I got nothing ahead of me. To being this person that can be in the room with Cheryl Lee, and how that has changed for me and that Laura. And it was a nerve-wracking thing to do because this is a tribute to the 30th anniversary. So of course I am, you know, I'm trying to stay out of the book, but I keep coming back in is the way that I feel that it happens. But then it's also spread out through the book. So if you're listening to this and you don't know who the hell I am, and you're like, I don't give a rat's ass what happened to this dude in 1992, it's okay, because you got Greg Fienberg, you got Ron Garcia, who's going to blow your mind, you got Mary Sweeney, and you got Cheryl Lee. So you can ignore my nonsense and you'll be just fine.
But I think you're a true fan, and I think that it's a good balance. You know what I mean? It's not all you. It really is going into the history and getting to speak to all these different people and hear how the making of this film was and stuff. So I think it's a wonderful balance.
Yeah. And Scott, did you happen to have any other titles for this book, or do you know that's what I'm going to name this book?
It was 100% always Fire Walk with Me, Your Laura Disappeared. I can tell you when I came up with it, and I did not put this in the book because I have rules for myself. As Frank Sinatra says in One for the Road, you got to be true to your code. And I don't talk about the moments I get to have with the actors from the show. I'm very respectful of their time. And, I find it to be a privilege to run the Blue Rose and get to do these interviews. I don't take it for granted. To be more crass, I'm not a star fucker in any way. Like, to me, it's about the pursuit of art. That being said, I was lucky enough to be out to dinner with Ray Wise and Cheryl Lee one time. And it was not a Twin Peaks event. We're just friends going out for dinner, which is ridiculous. But that is what happened. And during that dinner, I was watching Cheryl and Ray, and we're talking about our children and art. And we're not talking about Twin Peaks. You never bring up Twin Peaks in those situations. And I don't want to anyway. But I sat across and I'm like, that's Laura Palmer and Leland Palmer.
Yeah.
And I'm having dinner with them. And in that moment, I realized my Laura has disappeared. Laura Palmer, who was this thing to me, this beacon, this vessel of despair, and how you cannot be who you are, but you can still work through it. I mean, so much. As I say, I've never been sexually abused, and I don't bond with Laura over that. I mean, so many people do, and I understand why, of course. I mean, that's so much of Laura's story, but that's not my story. To me, the way she presents herself to the town of Twin Peaks, and it's not really who she is and what she's going through, that's what I relate to so much more. But I realized, like, I couldn't see anyone but Cheryl Lee, that figure, this person that I had to meet, that I had to talk to, that I had to have a part of my life had disappeared. And that is when it's the title of the book.
Yeah, I love it.
And she had to be the last chapter, the idea of the book is you're rolling and you're learning about me and where I'm carrying this person, and then, like, I want you as a reader to not think, well, fuck that guy, he gets to know Cheryl Lee. No, go out and meet your Cheryl Lee, or whatever it is, plant the yard you want to plant, or build the house you want to build, or whatever it is your dream is. You can do it. If I can do it, you can do it, because nobody was more farther away than me from the end goal.
Because we're on this topic, and I one of the questions I had was near the end of the book. You get personal with us, with the audience, and was that something you plan on doing? Because throughout the book, because you speak of that, I thought you were planting the seed a little bit, because there was one line that stood out to me, and it didn't click until I read that chapter before the Cheryl Lee interview, when you talk about your personal life. There was a line, and I'm going to misquote it, Scott, so please help me. I couldn't find it this morning. I'm like, I know it's there. It was something about, like, taking the same, two people taking the same road, but it's going to be a different journey for each person, or something of that nature. And then you said, that sentence can run through my head all day. You ended it something like that. And that stood out. I was like, that was a weird thing to say. But then at the end, you talk about your journey and how you could have just been that corporate slave, but then you were just like, I'm done. And and meeting Catherine Coulson was kind of like the beginning, was your beginning point to where you are now, almost.
And, I feel like this was the first time. I've talked about it before, but this was the first time I really get to lay it out and explain it, because I don't take what I get to do for granted. And, I just submitted, like, issue 16 of the Blue Rose to the printer yesterday. And, it's great. We're getting subscriptions in, and I don't take that for granted. Like, none of this could have happened. There could be no Blue Rose. There would be no Laura's Ghost and all of the Twin Peaks Unwrapped book and all these things that I got to do, because I was just raised to not be that way. I just came from a very conservative, not art friendly area. And I tried to hide it for as long as I could, but there was something about meeting Catherine and her being just so kind to me, and then her dying. I mean, I met her and she's dead in 6 weeks. And I just sat there in that cubicle and I thought, I'm going to die, like not today, but I'm going to die. I don't want to spoil it for everyone, but all three of us, someday we'll all be dead.
No!
Yeah. And I mean, of course I knew that before Catherine Coulson died. I mean, duh. Yeah. But you just realize you got this path. And sometimes you just get pushed on it. Your life just gets pushed in this way. And I was like, I don't care if I fail or I succeed, it doesn't matter. I have to try. And all of that came from Twin Peaks. And that's a lot to put on a TV show.
I think it's pretty amazing. I think it's an amazing story, Scott. But I was wondering, like, were you purposely sprinkling that in the book? Or was it just one of those weird?
Yeah, I mean, to some degree. I mean, I guess what happened was, you asked me if I had planned to be so open and honest. I was thinking about it because let's also say, even our discussion we're having here, I mean, 100% honest, I hate this. I hate what we're talking about.
I know.
I don't want to talk about this. I don't want to be this person. I wish we were talking about my jokes about the nudity at the Roadhouse.
I got questions for all that. Yeah.
I mean, but on the flip side, I thought, look, I can't talk about why Fire Walk With Me matters, why I watched it every year during that time period where I was creating no art. I watched it on my birthday every year. Fire Walk With Me is not the movie you should be watching on your birthday.
That's a red flag, right? To anybody, like, if a guy watches Fire Walk With Me on his birthday, should we stay away from him? Yeah.
I mean, it's not right. But I knew that I had to sort of come out with it. Like, it was like, you know what? I know I'm not alone in this. And otherwise, I'm just a nut that's chasing Cheryl Lee her whole life. Yeah. And that also is crazy as well. So I went out to Twin Peaks during COVID. And because, life was horrible, as we all remember, my wife and I said, screw it. We're staying at the Salish. We're getting massages. Aww. We're eating dinner. I mean, I don't know how much that weekend cost. I do know I wrote it off. But that's when I wrote that chapter. I just said to my wife, look, I'm going to go out on the balcony and I got to work. And I went out and the Douglas firs are there and I could hear the sound. And I thought, and I just puked that chapter. And now, of course, I refined it when we got home and over time, and David Bushman helped edit it. And he actually forced me to go a little deeper. And that's what's in there, because I was afraid. I kept touching and coming back and touching and coming back. And he said, you got to go farther. Yeah. And so I wanted to do it, but I was scared to do it. And also I hate that it's out there.
Well, I'm glad that you did it. I think it helps all of us. I mean, there's plenty of people. I mean, I think we all look at Twin Peaks and Fire Walk With Me differently. And we're talking about, a lot of people who've been sexually abused and stuff like that, how much that means to them that it's out there, that this happens to many different people. But also, I think, a lot of this can touch us in other ways to say that, we're hurting inside in our own ways. And to know that there's art out there that expresses that, and that in some way, what I love is that our community is so good to each other. In some ways, I always feel like that's the big hug. That's the big way of us all coming together, or whatever we're going through, that we're all in this together and that we care about each other. And I don't know. I see that in the book. I see that in our community. I'd love to just touch on Greg Fienberg interview there. He's the producer of Fire Walk With Me. What I loved is that, like, I was always thinking, how in the heck did Fire Walk With Me come out basically a year after the show was canceled? I'm like, that is like the quickest turnaround I've ever seen for a film. And you get to touch on that with Greg, and really, he seemed to have all the answers to that.
So the Greg interview is one of the weirdest things, I swear, that's ever happened to me, because he was not, and no offense to Greg, He wasn't on my list. I mean, I'm trying to get interviews with Chris Isaak, Moira Kelly, Kyle McLaughlin. Angelo. I'm out there hustling. And one day I'm just sitting there, and right to my side is my Fire Walk with Me poster. And I was looking at all the names on the poster, and I was like, interviewed him, said no. And then I see Greg Fienberg. And I'm like, why have I never tried? He's listed as the only producer on the film. That's it. And I thought, you guys never interviewed him, right?
No.
Nope.
Yeah,
No.
I never heard anyone interview him. And I thought, who is this guy? Then that night, my wife and I are watching Deadwood, executive producer Greg Fienberg. And I'm like, it was the same day. I saw my poster, I saw him there. And I was like, I'm getting Greg Fienberg.
Gentlemen, when two separate events occur simultaneously pertaining to the same object of inquiry, we must always pay strict attention.
And then thank the Lord I did. And we're not going to talk about it because these cheap bastards got to buy the book. But you are about to hear a story that has never been told before. And it's insane.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And all I want to say is, you didn't make reference to this, but I'm going to bring it up now. When you read that chapter, in my opinion, he pulled a Dale Cooper, because Dale Cooper wakes up at 2 a.m. and it's like, I know who killed Laura Palmer. This guy wakes up at 2 a.m. He goes, I know what we're going to do. And I'm like, oh, holy crap. He is Dale Cooper at 2 a.m. Unlike Dale Cooper, he remembered what he dreamt. He didn't just forget.
Where can people pick up this book?
So you can go to bluerosemag.com. You can go to FayettevilleMafiaPress.com. And if you buy it from either place, I will sign the book. If you put in the notes who you want it to sign to, I will sign it to you. Because I'm always afraid to personalize it to the person who bought the book. Because I don't want to seem so sure that they're buying the book for them to read. It could be someone else. So unless someone says it, but you can go there. And it's coming out in May. But it's at the printers. It's been at the printers since January. I freaking hate the world. So it's soon. I mean, it could be, I don't know when it's coming, but very soon.
But really, people should be pre-ordering, because I mean, I think Brian, from our own experience, being a self-publisher, you need all those sales that you can get. So it's so important that people pre-order the book. Don't wait and say, oh yeah, remind me in May, I'll get the book. You should be getting the book right now, because it's going to help the person. It's going to show that, that you're supporting the people that make this work. So go get it now. Don't wait till May.
Well, even more than that, like, honestly, if you haven't pre-ordered the book, you might have missed out, to be honest with you, because I did do a print run of color books. And if you're listening to this and you have pre-ordered the book, which Ben and Brian have pre-ordered it a long time ago, you're getting a color book and you're fine. But honestly, I'm almost out, and I'm going to Chicago in April, from April 7th to the 14th, to host a David Lynch week-long film event. And I'm taking a limited number of color books if the printer makes it in time. I'm a nervous wreck, but they say they will. When those are gone, they're gone. There will never be color books. Now, there's going to be black and white books, and those will last forever. Price of those color books, when I get down to it, you're going to pay. So for all of you great people who are like, oh, I love the Blue Rose, I love Twin Peaks Unwrapped or Laura's Ghost, I want to continue supporting FMP, and you pre-ordered it, you only paid $22.99 for a color book that's going to be a collector's edition. I'm sure I'm going to be selling those books for $50 to $70 when we get down to the last 10.
They're expensive to do in color, right? I mean, it's not cheap.
Oh, yeah.
You looked at Twin Peaks Unwrapped, the book there, to do in color, and you're like, oh my gosh, it's way too expensive to do this in color.
Yeah, and the only reason I did this book in color is because I personally wanted a color book.
There you go.
And so we rolled. I felt like with the Chicago thing, I could move 1,000 copies. So I did it, but I can't do it again. And honestly, I wouldn't be able to do it now because paper has gone up so much, and all these sort of things have happened in the last couple months that printing is really hard. So if you already pre-ordered it, you're good. You don't have to worry about it. You're getting a color, but I can't really say how many more I have. So it never says that it's going to be in color on the website because it's not a guarantee, but up to now it has been. So that's why you should pre-order, because sometimes I give little treats away. Like with Laura's Ghost, if you pre-ordered, you got it signed by Cheryl Lee for free.
Scott, I also want to know, I do notice that you're not in an orange jumpsuit. So you don't have to serve any time for the things you did that you published in this book, which is good. We will see though, right? We will see.
We'll see. I don't know what the statute of limitations are, but I have committed crimes because of Twin Peaks in my life.
I was shocked.
And you shared it. You put it down on paper.
Wouldn't you? But wouldn't you?
Yeah. You know what though? When you were talking about, you worked at a record video store,
right?
And I worked at KB Toys. I never stole anything, but when something cool would come in, I'd put it in the back and my whole paycheck would be blown because I would be putting this stuff I wanted in the back where really I was supposed to be putting out on the floor. No. So I hear you. It's hard when you're a fan of something, especially Firewalk with Me. It sounded like you didn't really get much of, you got like what you said, like 4 copies, 3 copies, maybe to be rented, not even for sale.
Well, that's because back then you couldn't buy. And that is another thing about this book, is that I try to set things in the time to make you remember that you couldn't own Twin Peaks back then. You didn't have those things. Yeah. So what we're talking about is, yes, I stole, I think they went out of business, so I'm fine. They're long gone. But I stole the VHS Firewalk with Me the day it was released. I mean, I wanted a copy that had never gone out. I made sure I worked that day. When the videos came in, I hid it to the side. I had my friend come in to pretend to rent it. I didn't even rent him. Like, I could have at least charged him the rental. We just faked the whole thing. Out the door, he went with it. I'd stolen a box, put it in my car, along with a bunch of stuff. Yeah, I was a little thief.
You have a chapter on talking about the 2 of the scripts, like the first draft and then another version of that. Going through that, was there anything new that you learned in looking at these scripts?
A ton of things. I mean,
I learned that you're a maniac because I pictured you with a wall filled with things, because I'm like, how did you keep track of it all? Yeah, reading it, my brain started bending a little bit because I'm like, but in script 1, but script 2, and that, and I think this chapter alone is the price for admission for someone that was like, should I buy this book? This chapter, you don't have to sit there and read script 1 and script 2 yourself. You do that work for us, and I thank you, because I've only read script 2, and I think what you did is a fantastic job, but my head exploded. I'm like, I just pictured you in a room filled with things, like just paper everywhere.
So, I mean, that was the hardest thing I've ever written in my life. And the Philip Jeffries section of that took me 6 months. And I'm a quick writer. I mean, I'm not a John Thorne here who, really takes time to do stuff. I mean, John really thinks things out, and he's that kind. I'm more of a spastic writer. I write, I'm thinking, I'm writing, my fingers can't go as fast as my head is going. But this, I had a card table, so it wasn't up on a wall, and I had it all out, man. And I had multiple computer screens because I would check the film and try to compare up and then check the missing pieces. And I had to keep going back to it. And this was a chapter that I have to thank Mary Hutter, who's a super fan, and Brad Payne, who's a super fan, because they don't have Twin Peaks podcasts or Twin Peaks blogs, because I needed someone to read this book that also would not then say, hoo, I'm writing this and, I'm spoiling this. So I sent it to them at different times to just say, look, you guys are smart Twin Peaks people. Can you follow what I'm saying? And Mary read it first. And then when I revised it on Mary and gave it to Brad. And so that helped, because it's so complex. But I mean, I uncovered a ton of stuff.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's a great
And,
chapter.
and the first draft is not something that is easily available. Like I don't think you can find that on the web
No.
very easily. I mean, the
No, it's
second
not
draft is more available. So I think for you to have access to that and be able to share that is so, Brian's right. It's like the price of admission. I mean, that alone makes this book so valuable.
Yeah.
Well, and that was an early chapter. I'm so thankful I started that chapter second. That was what I did second. The first thing I did is the ridiculousness about the subtitles. That was the first chapter I read. The script thing, I remember I started in January, a whole year ago. And I remember I was still going back to it and rereading and also finding where I wasn't exactly correct, because there was no way I could make a mistake. I had to keep checking. When I said script one, did I mean it? Was it Chet Desmond or was it Agent Cooper? All those things. And I was still working on it well into May and going through, and I kept going back to that because you couldn't do it that often. I mean, my brain would explode.
A lot of great information in that. Don't want to spoil it for anybody. Just buy the book for this chapter alone, because I think it's great time capsule, because maybe a lot of people can't get their hands on either of those scripts.
It was that chapter is the chapter that I worried about the most. I forget where it ended up, if it's chapter 5 or not. I think I had it earlier in the book, and then I realized, like, if you weren't a diehard and you were reading this book and you came to that chapter, you would throw this book in the trash can. You know what I mean? So, because it's definitely a deep dive. And I almost put a thing on top that said, you can skip this chapter and go on if you're not, if you haven't seen Fire Walk with Me a bunch of times, just skip this chapter. But I also did try to make it funny. Yeah. I feel like there's a lot of jokes in that chapter because I wanted to make people laugh. And that also might have the UCD story too. Yes. So there is some personal stuff in there.
It starts off with that. I think
you're meeting Chris Isaak as well as in that chapter, I believe.
But that's before, right. Yeah. And I want to talk about Chris Isaak because I was so sad you did not get the interview with him. But I want to ask you, do you think he was blowing smoke up your ass? I mean, when he said, do you think his people just never gave him the email? Or you said you emailed him like 5 times, or you something like that?
It was more than 5. I'm sure I emailed them 10 times. And I actually did tell them, look, I'm putting this in my book. So when Chris finds out that you blocked me, understand this is going in my book. You have one more chance to give me an interview with Chris. And that's the only second time they responded to me. The first time they just said, we'll kick it upstairs and let you know. And which killed me because I'm like, wait a minute. I met Chris Isaak.
Yeah.
Chris Isaak said to me, his exact words, Blue Rose, that's my line. You started a magazine based on my line? And he looked to his guy and he said, I want to be in this. So who are you kicking it upstairs to? God?
Yeah.
Because Chris Isaak just said yes. So I told them in the final email, you're going to be the one because I'm putting this in the book.
Yeah.
And they said, how much time do we have? And I said, you got a month, but it could be longer. I just want the interview. And they never responded again. I don't think he was playing with me because I know when they're playing.
Yeah. It's funny seeing that photo. I want to ask you, did you ever watch the Chris Isaak show on Showtime?
I never did. And you can't find it, but I would love to see it.
So when it came on, I think in the early 2000s, it went like 3 seasons. It's very Curb Your Enthusiasm-ish,
right?
Because he's playing an absurd version of himself, and it's kind of funny. And I remember seeing reruns somewhere, and I liked it. But you can't find it anywhere. And I wasn't sure if you actually watched it when
I've never seen an episode, but I would love to.
Yeah, I mean, I looked to see if we were streaming. When I saw that photo of him and you, and I read that, I was like, the Chris Isaak show, I would love to rewatch that. And I couldn't find it myself. I do want to talk about chapter 6, which is Let's Rock. I think this is my personal favorite chapter because it's about the sound. It's about the music, the soundtrack.
And you get a mention in that chapter. That's why.
That always helps.
Isn't that interesting? His favorite chapter just happens to be the chapter he's in.
But it's also because I love the soundtrack so much. And I was listening to Twin Peaks records as I was reading this book yesterday. And in the beginning of the chapter, I think you say something like, you should really put on the Fire Walk with Me soundtrack. And I did. I put it right on.
Yeah, I hope people who read it do put the music on, especially in the music chapter, because I'm trying to break it down, and you have to be careful with copyright laws anyway, with like lyrics and things as far as how much you can print and, all those things. So it's kind of hard to tell people where you are in the song, but in that chapter, I don't know how many songs, I'm going to say 6 songs or so. And I break them down into how they play into the film and how Angelo just really wanted to show his work and how he really rose to the occasion in what I think is the hardest job for everyone. And that includes Cheryl Lee. And I know people might be like, what? But Cheryl Lee didn't have an expectation. We didn't know what she could do. But Angelo really succeeded in Twin Peaks. And then, as Ben points out, in less than a year, he has to write a whole new score. That's crazy.
Yeah.
And Scott, you basically said too that he could have just I'm just gonna reuse the stuff I had from the TV show. He could have just used that music. Instead, he's like, I'm gonna just create all new music for this soundtrack. I mean, it is incredible that what he came up with, and it's so good. I remember being in the theater when it came out and hearing the opening music. It's like, holy crap, this is gonna be a great film, because the music brings you in, and it's so good.
Well, and like when you went in for that first showing, that first day when it began, I thought it was going to start with Falling.
Right.
And had it, I wouldn't have been disappointed. I wouldn't have sat there and go, he should have wrote a new song. Yeah. Like everybody would have been fine if it started with Falling. But he not only does it not start with Falling, it starts with his best composition of his entire life, in my opinion. I think, and I don't just say that, I actually break it down and to show you what he did to create this piece of music that I think is the best theme. Although David Bushman wanted me to take that out of the book, because he said, how can you compare that to every theme ever written? Because other movies don't have a character that you already know when you're coming in. And I said, well, that's tough for other movies. I mean, wow.
But it's your book, so you can say what you want.
Right. So I didn't cut that. No.
I also like the fact that at the end, it's something I didn't know about. You give us like the Fire Walk with Me score in order using a lot of sources. And I think that's kind of cool for people who would want to put that together in a playlist.
And I have it in a playlist. I've had it in a playlist for, I don't know, maybe 10 years. And so I've listened to it in order many times. So that was one of the easiest things I did for the book. I just went to my iTunes and I copied it down, because it's been in there ever since the archives came out. I don't remember what year that was, but a long time.
Yeah, I think that's so cool. So I know Ben gave me the archive. So I'm like, oh, this is something I can do now. And you did talk about Blue Frank, and that's a conversation we had on the podcast years ago. Yeah. Which was great, because I had no idea there were 2 separate songs, and you blew my mind saying, nope, song 1's here, and then it goes into a different song at this point. And at that, I just thought they were one long song. Well,
and it's so interesting because had I never, I forget, Ben, he was getting Botox, so he couldn't.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah, yes. Botox. Yeah, I had some surgery, and
he was getting his eyes done.
Yes,
and he couldn't show up, so I had to fill in.
Yeah.
Had I not done that, I wouldn't have even known to talk about. I don't think that would be in the book at all. And then I break it down even farther than we did to show you how Lynch is kind of letting you know and what it means and why the songs are different.
Right.
So that's all thanks to Twin Peaks Unwrapped, because I wouldn't have known that other people didn't know that hadn't we been there. And then there were so many Twitter comments where all these people were like, I didn't know.
Yeah, I mean, and this can tie in. We're going to jump into the chapter about the Canada subtitle thing, because I think this is a good jumping point. Things that people didn't know, and I was fascinated by that chapter about the subtitle thing. Now, I know we don't want to give a lot away. I think people should really read this chapter because it's really fascinating. But the one thing I want to ask you is, are you afraid? Because someone later on does mention someone should not know about this. Are you afraid of now publishing this and that person may be having a slim chance of reading it or finding out? Or you're okay with it?
Oh, I'm okay with it.
You're okay with it.
I'm okay with it because it's the truth.
It is. But why do you think, so what we're talking about is some subtitles on some prints did not exist for people overseas.
Sometimes we'll never put in some of these, right? Some of
Yeah.
these videos or DVDs were never put in some of them.
And, like,
Yeah, now,
and-
did you two know that before you read this?
No.
I didn't know that.
I didn't know it either.
I had heard of people saying that they didn't know about Canada and stuff. I mean, that's been a common thing to me that I've heard that, and I can see how you can make that leap when you think that, like, oh, I'm in a bar and I'm still in a bar, so I'm in the same bar.
Right, you know.
I can kind of sort of get that, but I didn't know anything about subtitles. That was news to me.
When I first watched Fire Walk with Me, when they go to the second bar, I really thought it was behind. I thought it was part of the Roadhouse, but then you get that in Canada subtitle. But if that did not exist, yeah, I could see this being the behind the Roadhouse, like, seedy area that only a few people know about. But, like, you make a good point in that chapter about, like, if these things had happened in your own town, Big Ed or someone's in there and they're going to see it and they're going to say something.
Small town.
Yeah, it's a small town. I mean, but why do these prints exist without subtitles? Blows my mind.
Hey,
Blows my mind.
I worked my ass off to get an answer. I emailed people in France. I went to CB2. I sent so many emails out. I tried to go through, it's funny, I'm not going to remember her last name and I'm going to get in big trouble. Lindsay Bowden, which I said immediately. But I even went through her because she being in UK and booking the film. And I was trying to get the distributor. I really wanted an answer for this.
Yeah,
I talked to so many people. And I mean, I did not come up with a satisfactory answer of why for like 28 years or something crazy, maybe 22, all of Europe had no subtitles in this film. And that's so weird.
Very weird. It's very weird. And I mean, I could see someone watching it, right, and not seeing the subtitles and think this is just an artistic vision that maybe we shouldn't really hear what they're saying because the music is loud. And I buy that, because if you watch,
but there's some dialogue that isn't even spoken at all in any language that we don't understand, right?
I know.
One-armed man and the little man from another place that they don't really speak. Yeah, like you kind of need those subtitles to understand what they're talking about.
Yeah, they're missing a part of the story here.
Right.
Yeah, that's crazy. Now, it's weird when you say subtitles, but then the Canada thing, that's not a subtitle. That's that's a title card telling you where you are. It's amazing that that's gone too. So it's like not even subtitles.
Someone says welcome to Canada. Someone says welcome to Canada. It's not a title card.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, people were saying like how they thought that it was just a random piece of dialogue.
Like I'm a blank fart or whatever.
Yeah. Well, I did actually love that when someone says, "Well, I thought welcome to Canada was like I'm as blank as a fart," and because the reason that I love it, and here's why I spent all that time on this thing. Like, there's a whole chapter on this ridiculous thing. But I actually, if I can be highfalutin, this will be my one highfalutin time. I actually think that chapter, and that's how like I said, that's where I started the whole book, because I thought this is so important, because we live in a time where we can't see other people's point of view. I know, and I've known my whole life, that second room is in Canada and it's at a different bar. But there's a whole continent of people who didn't know that. And it's easy for me to look at them and go, well, they're stupid and I'm smart, because I've always known that. But when you see other people's point of view, like when someone said, well, I ignored Welcome to Canada because of all the other stupid things they say, and you got to go with, that's true. Are you sitting here trying to explain why Jacques Renault says the stupid things he says? There's a lot of nonsense in the movie. So you get to understand other people's point of view by that chapter. And I think it matters. And on the flip side, I think my funniest jokes are in that chapter. Like I think that chapter is hilarious. And I laugh quite a bit at that ridiculousness of that chapter.
You also had a chapter with Ron Garcia. He's a cinematographer of the film. And what I love that you did, and I don't know why I never thought to do this, Scott, you got stills of the shots of the film, and you shared that with Ron. So you could say, here, look at this. And like, tell me about this scene. Or, I mean, like he handles the lighting, and he handles like how the shot's going to look. And for him to visually look at that, I'm sure that helps him process it and think about 30 years ago, what was I thinking of doing in that? And I thought that was a great thing that you did.
I agree. And I was so excited that he was open to doing it that way. When I first contacted him, he said, look, I'm getting up there in age. I don't know what I'm going to be able to do here. I may not remember anything. And I said, don't worry about it. We're just going to have a discussion. And that's when I thought, I wonder if it would help if I showed him pictures.
Yeah.
And so I captured my favorite shots of the film. And I might have talked to him for 5 hours. I bet we talked in 2 sessions, and I bet you it was 5 hours. And there's more. There's stuff that's not in the book. It'll come out someday in the Blu-rays, because we had a whole thing about the pilot that I couldn't put in the book. There was no. He was there.
Nice. That's
on
good.
The first day of filming the Red Room of the pilot, the European ending.
Wow. And
he told me about that whole day. And I got all that. Someday that'll show up somewhere. But I wasn't going to put that in the Firewalk with Me book, because it just doesn't belong.
Him talking about the David Bowie stuff, the set he built that was never used, all that stuff. And you're like, that exists? There was more? Like, oh my God. I mean, it sounds like they were going to do a whole lot more with Bob, the one-arm, the little man from another place, with Jeffries. I'm like, oh my God. And yeah, it's just a fascinating story. I don't want to ruin it, but yeah, this is another great chapter that, like, if you're a diehard, you'll learn a lot of new stuff from this chapter.
Definitely. And he really did know a lot. And he's also a great guy. A really, really great guy. And, sometimes when I do these interviews, like sometimes you bond with them and that's great. And you have different things, but every once in a while, you almost feel like you're cashing casino chips. And I think I got to cash in his chips. I don't think he doesn't know in his real life how much we all love him. And how much he did. And I think this interview helped, because he said to me many times, well, isn't this boring? No one wants this. And I said, you don't understand. They're not going to want what I said.
We want this.
They are going to love what you are telling. Like, he's telling this David Bowie stuff that, is blowing your brains. And he's like, is this boring? And you're like,
he's like, are you kidding? Tell me more. Tell me more.
Yeah.
So I think it helped him, because he even told me, that's why we had another one, because he read the interview and he was like, nah, I just don't think it was good and we should do it. And then he's just like telling me more stuff, and it's all mixed into one, like it's one thing, but that actually was 2 sessions. And then he said, like, oh, I gave it to my wife to read it because I just wasn't sure, should this be in, and all this stuff. And I was like, no, buddy, like, this is going to be huge. And people are going to be so grateful for this information. Like, no, we do care.
Wealth of knowledge. So cool.
It was very cool.
There's a chapter on the missing pieces, and I love that we get kind of into the history, and forget how long we waited for those deleted scenes. And it's right, you spell it out. They weren't missing pieces to us. They were the deleted scenes that we waited so long for.
Right.
And I don't know. It's cool that you got that chapter. It was really cool to just go back into that and see. And I was wondering, like, is there more pieces? Is there more stuff out there that we didn't get?
Well, that was the last chapter I wrote. So I was really holding that chapter for Chris Isaak. I mean, I was really hoping I had a Chris Isaak interview because, again, he said yes. So I thought we had him. And then Angelo also had said yes. And I thought I had him, but it didn't work out. So I kind of needed one more thing. And I remember I tweeted out and I just said, should the missing pieces be part of my Fire Walk with Me book? Because in reality, it's not the 30th anniversary of the missing pieces. So I thought, does this even have anything to do with it? But overwhelmingly, Twitter said, yes, the missing pieces should be in the book.
Yes.
So that was the last thing I wrote. I was actually going to skip the missing pieces, but I'm glad I did.
Gosh, I can't imagine. I kind of link the missing pieces as an extension of, I mean, it's like, it still fits, somehow it fits in. I mean, I appreciate it as it being its own entity, but it still, to me, feels like just an extended part of the main film and stuff. So I kind of think, yeah, I can't imagine Firewalk without the missing pieces.
Yeah, I don't know. And I'd like to thank Doug Pa because he really did a good job. I reached out to him and he gave me some great stuff for it. He had a major part in getting the missing pieces to exist. And so he really walks us through. And then, you know, it's crazy. I wanted to interview the guy, and I'm sorry, I don't know his name, but it's in the book, that was the executive producer of that. And so I got his contact thing, and through Doug Pa, he was very nice to hook us up. And the guy has an NDA. He's no longer at CBS, but part of his leaving CBS is he's never allowed to talk about what he did.
Wow.
With the missing pieces. So don't bother trying to book him on your
gosh.
show.
Wow.
And I'm like, this is stupid.
Yeah.
I mean, all due respect to everyone listening, and I'm including myself, no one gives a shit about the missing pieces. Like, why should a corporation care that you talk about the missing pieces? It's top secret. Like, what are you doing? Like, you know, 1,000 people care. Let's get it on. What if we didn't have what Ron Garcia said on paper? Like, let's get this stuff down and capture history. And so he can't talk. So that's why we don't have him. He has an NDA, and that's just stupid.
That is stupid. Undeleted scenes. That's weird. I could see something like being in the movie you want to keep secret, but something that doesn't really.
He's not. I mean, I should be more clear. He's not allowed to talk about his work at CBS at all.
Wow.
I mean, he's just not allowed because he doesn't work there anymore. And he, you know, because he also was in charge of all of the Star Trek behind the scenes and DVD stuff and all that stuff. So I'm sure that's what they really care about. It just covers the missing pieces. But I'm also like, I mean, who cares?
Yeah.
Scott, I don't think you brought this up in the book, but there would have been theories out there that Lynch was actually working on maybe a trilogy or multiple Twin Peaks movies, and the reason the missing pieces weren't in there was because he was saving it for the next movie and stuff like that. Did you come across anything about that? I mean, it's not true. I mean, if anything, your interviews prove that it's not true. So there's no reason to bring up that theory, because it seems clearly that Lynch had a plan for this movie and he wanted all of it.
Yeah, no one ever said that to me, including Bob Engels, who I didn't do a new interview with him for this book, but I had interviewed him for the Blue Rose, and part of that interview is in the book. But no one's ever told me that was the case.
Yeah, I'm sure it was just the fans wondering why it was so much of it cut out.
Yeah, and that interview with Mary Sweeney about the whole process was very fascinating as well. Like that was her first big gig, going from assistant editor to the main editor, which is
a film.
Yeah, that's kind of scary. It's funny. I'm fascinated by the behind the scenes stuff, just like Ben, because our backgrounds are in editing and TV and whatnot. And when I got into editing, it was tape to tape. Now this was film to film.
Assemble edits.
Assemble edits. And it scared the hell out of me because if you made one mistake, you had to start over again. Also, there's a good chance you might mess up your own footage. Now it's all digital, it's all easy. But when she's talking about film editing, like my anxiety went up, and I'm like, my God, that's real talent. You got to cut that film. You have to make sure it's correct, and that's her first big editing job.
Well, and what I thought was really fascinating is how she goes into the very job and the industry, at how the amount of years it takes before you get the ability to touch film with your hands, obviously not really with your hands, but actually make a real cut. You know, she said just to cut one thing to another thing, it takes forever to get the ability to do that. And she kind of lucked into it by just coming up through Twin Peaks and her getting to cut episode 14 with David, and he liked it. And so it kind of makes sense. If you have the person that edited episode 14, you would want them to edit Firewalk with Me. I mean, it's sort of all made sense. Her path, I had never heard that before. That was news to me. Not that she had, I mean, you can tell she edited it from the credits, but I'm just saying, you know, that experience that she had with working on that episode and how well it worked with David. I don't remember what she says, but I do know that I got emotional in my interview with her. I think it's about her being pregnant during that time. She really does share like part of her life. And it really moved me at the way she balanced love and motherhood also while editing this incredible movie. And like, I really liked her. I've never heard from her since, nor did she approve her quotes. Like, I sent it off. I've never heard from her again. So I don't know that I impressed her, but I got the interview, so I guess who cares? But it was really a great interview.
I mean, like I said before, I was so glad with the questions that you asked the people you interviewed. And one of the questions I've always wanted to know was like, how did the angels get into the movie? Because they're not in either one of these scripts. And, you know, there was that Ohio event of Firewalk with Me with Ray Wise and Cheryl Lee. And there was time to ask questions, and there was time to go up to Cheryl and ask her. And I always wanted to say to her, you know, it's like, I feel like, I don't know why, I'm crazy. I always thought she was the reason the angels were brought into this. I know it just seems weird, but I always thought like some reason she was like, David, this is too heavy. You know, can you add angels? I don't know. I love that you asked that question. I think you asked it maybe a few times in the book and stuff like that. And I don't know. I just wanted to say that I think some of these, you asked the right questions.
Thank you. It is interesting, and it does become a through line through the book, I feel like, the angel, because again, it comes up in this, there is no angels in the scripts. The word is never in the script. To get that information, you know, and then it goes all the way to Cheryl Lee, and she answers as in a Cheryl Lee way, that's for sure. She's well trained.
I commend you that you had the guts though, because I didn't have the guts at that event to say it as the audience. I didn't have enough guts to go up to her and ask her, but I'm so glad that at least you asked these things. And
I know I had to ask some hard questions of Mary Sweeney and Cheryl Lee. You know, sometimes I'm mad at myself that I didn't maybe push Cheryl a little bit harder, because she won't always share. You get so close, she gets so close, but you know, but then also I think, my God, she gave so much to her art already. Does she really have to give more? Does she really have to relive this? You know, you do get that this movie weighs on her even all these years later. And how could it not? It's a hard place to be, because they're giving you your time for nothing. And you want to be respectful, but you also want to know these things. You want to know the answers.
Yeah, I think she gave a good answer. I mean, people got to read it, but I think her answers were good. I think you're respectful of her. She has a boundary. and you know it. And I think you're very respectful of that boundary. So
Yeah. I love that you twisted, Cheryl Lee is an acting coach. And I love that at one point you said, okay, as a coach, how do you, if somebody was going for this part of Laura Palmer, basically, how would you mentor this person? And I just love that she responded that you answered it, but that was a great way kind of like to, kind of take her out of it, but also all the experience she's had over 30 years. I mean.
Yeah, I mean, that was one that I did have written down because, you try to think of how can you get them to talk. My favorite Twin Peaks question I ever asked is not in this book. It's in a Red Room podcast with Mark Frost. When I had interviewed Mark Frost, I had a great question for him, and that was, who is your favorite Beatle? And the reason being is whatever your answer is, tells you so much about who you are as a person. And I knew that if I asked Mark Frost, what's it like to work with David Lynch, who gets all the credit and people always forget about you, and you did all this hard work, he's not going to answer that question. You cannot ask Mark Frost that question, but you can ask him, who's your favorite Beatle? And if you read his answer, I think he's answering that question. And so I do try to think about that stuff before I interview someone. How can I get them to answer the question they don't want to answer, but ask it in a way that, I love interviewing people. That's what I love to do in life. As I say, I can't change a tire. I can't help my wife hang a picture. I don't know how to get on the roof and get the leaves out of the gutter, but I can interview someone. It's a useless talent. But
I wouldn't say it's useless. I
know.
Ask my wife. It's useless.
But you did a great job with this book. I'm going to ask you ready for the big question? This is the big one. Hold on to your butts. Here we go. All
right.
Why shouldn't we buy a pool from
Coffee Time
in Sarasota, Florida?
Yeah.
That's the big one. I got to know.
I know. So
that was a crazy line that's in the book.
And it will be in every book I ever publish, by the way.
Is this a new thing that you're doing? I don't remember reading this before.
No, it's the first book. It will be in all of my books. It will end all of my books. Whether it becomes the end, I really want it to become the end of my podcast appearances, my personal appearances, my radio appearances. But we haven't totally gotten to the legal phase yet. But we hired
Coffee Time
in Sarasota, Florida, to do a remodeling job at our house down here. And it has been a nightmare. And whether we're going to, I am not a litigious person. I actually don't even think there should be lawsuits. Bless anyone who has lawsuits. I don't like this idea that you go to the doctor to save you and maybe he makes a mistake. But also it's his job and we all make mistakes. But these people have been horrible and they haven't completed the job. And we hired them, and I swear it was before COVID.
Wow.
And it's still not done, and the pool drips and it drains all over, and they did everything they did, they screwed up. And I have never fought with them yet. They think I'm a pushover. They don't know that's in my book, because I kept thinking, why are they messing with a writer? Why are they fooling around with someone who has a podcast and goes out on things? It's a dumb decision to mess with somebody like me, who I keep things forever. Hey, did you go to the American Twin Peaks Fest this year? Oh, no, you didn't. You know why? It doesn't exist anymore. But I would say, don't mess with me. It's just a thing. So, that's why they are horrible. They have no customer service and no follow through. And the guy who runs it is a horrible, horrible human being who was mean to me and my wife and attempted murder against us even. How about that?
Oh my God.
I could go on forever.
Attempted murder.
Look at you started, Brian. Look at you started.
I wanted to know. I
derailed the whole podcast.
Attempted murder. Are we going to see a Netflix documentary about this stuff?
Oh, Maybe. I mean, again, I don't know if we'll end the lawsuit. We're still playing a little game with them, which is fun for me. Because like I got nothing to do. I mean, I take vendettas. They're serious to me.
Yeah. I love it. That's great.
Yeah. It's real fun.
That is the hard hitting question I was waiting for the end to ask.
Scott, this is going to come out in May.
Mhm.
And what's exciting is, everybody should get this and be ready for the actual 30th anniversary of Fire Walk with Me that comes out. I mean, is going to be August. And I mean, I feel like that everybody would want that to celebrate and to, if they're going to have rewatches of Fire Walk with Me, that they can have that book beside them and read the interviews and just relive the experience of Fire Walk with Me.
Yeah, and I was very close to pulling off an event, and I'm still kind of working on it. But with COVID, things are so tricky. But you can go to Chicago, the Music Box Theater, April 7th through the 14th. They're showing every Lynch film.
Wow.
And like everything that Lynch has done, like ever, is going to show. Mm-hmm. It's really cool. And what I'm most excited about is they're showing Industrial Symphony in 35 millimeter.
Wow. That's
crazy. I mean, I really can't wait to see that.
I don't even know how they'd get that. I feel like that's not something that
they got it from Lynch.
Wow.
It's directly from Lynch is what they told me. Cause that's what I was like, how do you get that? And they were like, they got it directly from Lynch. They're showing Boxing Helena in 35 millimeter, which
nice.
I mean, that's incredible. That's also a special print. And I get to go out there and do the Q&A. So I'm interviewing Dwayne Dunham and Charlotte Stewart. So that'll be fun. Nice. And I'll be there to sell your book. what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring one of every book, and people can just pay us and we'll get their address so they don't have to take it and worry about it. We'll ship it when I get back to Florida. Wow. So with free shipping, I'm not going to charge any shipping in America. So it's just like that way I didn't have to bring all that stuff, but we'll have the Twin Peaks Unwrapped book and Laura's Ghost. And then I will have Fire Walk with Me books there.
Nice.
Awesome.
So people can
what is the date on that? When is that?
April
happening?
7th through the 14th in Chicago. Wow. You do need to show proof of vaccination to enter, and that's good because please don't kill me. So are
you going to be there the whole week then? You're going to be there?
Yeah, I'll be there for every showing. Yep. I'll be out there selling your guys' book. So what I'm doing.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
To try to make you guys some money.
Oh man.
And then the Blue Rose issue 16, we're back. We took a year off. We are back. Costs are up 30%. I just turned it in, which if you pre-ordered on the first day or early on, you paid a little less than people now, because I was like, what? Paper is crazy right now. There's a lot of trouble in the world, but we are going forth. Issue 16 is about the 5th anniversary of the return. And me and John Thorne wrote our first article together. We co-authored.
I can't believe this has been your first article that he has written. You've done 15 issues and you've never wrote an article together?
We never have. We had this idea, and it was really funny because we have completely different styles, but we think, the same. We both obviously think about Twin Peaks a lot. So it was really fun to write with John. It was a very fun experience. I hope we get to do it again. And then issue 17 is going to be all about Lost Highway.
Nice.
Awesome.
And
I had to get a few copies of that because that's my favorite film. So
well, I'm getting some really good interviews for that. So I've done one, so I can announce that. And that was Natasha Gregson, who played Sheila. And she was a great interview, very sweet. And so, but I've got some really cool yeses, but I never talk about it until they're recorded. So we'll hold off on that because they could always get canceled. But that should be a really cool issue. That's coming out this fall. So go to Blue Rose Mag.
Is each issue, are you getting them individual, or can you get both? Can you pay for both?
No, you have to do it together. So we've stopped, like 14 and 15 come together, 16 and 17 will come together. Like I said, there was a significant cost increase on the printing. which there's nothing I can do about it now because we already announced the 2, but I'd like to make it to 20 issues at least. So I'm hoping we can make it to 20. I think it'd be cool if there were 20 issues of the Blue Rose, but
I want it to go on forever. I mean, we got.
I would too.
We don't have enough Twin Peaks resources out there still to.
It's not up to me. It's up to people who are interested. But I will say that the subscriptions have been really strong this time.
Nice.
Much stronger than for the art issue, and which might have been people just are not that interested in the art. I don't know, but it's been a lot stronger right off the bat. So awesome. That's a good sign.
Yeah. I think taking a break is always nice, and like people don't realize what they miss until it's gone, right? You kind of took a year off, and now people are like, damn, I missed that magazine. So
well, and so many people keep saying to me, why don't you just do it digitally? And I've got news for you. We're never just doing it digitally. The reason I started the Blue Rose is because I liked getting wrapped in plastic back in the day, and I like the fact that we ship them out. Is it a pain? Oh my God, it's a pain. It is such a pain. It's a horrible, miserable pain.
But there is something special about having that physical thing that you hold on to. I can sit on my couch and I can go through the pages and read it. And there is something special about having a physical magazine. And it seems like printing is a dying breed. Entertainment Weekly has stopped printing.
Yeah, I know. We outlasted Entertainment Weekly. How about that?
You're better than Entertainment Weekly. They have gone downhill anyway. I mean,
I haven't subscribed to them since they didn't cover my 30-something book. That's when I quit. I was like, because they do so many other oral histories that were like 30-something. And when they didn't, I was like, oh, it's solely because I'm not a huge corporation. That means all those other oral histories weren't better. They were just part of a corporation.
Right.
But I just remember, did you guys read in your version of the book, because you got PDFs, did you get Jeff Jensen's foreword?
No,
we did not.
It was blank.
Okay, because now obviously it's in because it's at the printer. So that's good. So you'll have something new to read when the book comes out. It's so good. I can say that because it's not mine. He actually brings up a theory that I've never heard anyone say about Fire Walk with Me. And it was like so good that I was like, oh, I wish this wasn't like, why didn't I think of this? And why didn't I write about this? And isn't that exciting? Like I did a whole book and he just does this forward and he just says something that made me wanted to write more, which is exciting because I think that's everything about Fire Walk with Me. There's always a different way to look at it. It's a really, really good forward. I think you'll like it.
Nice.
And Scott, you kind of stayed away from theories, but at one point you had a Cooper hair theory. And I was surprised you didn't. I don't think you touched on it. You didn't talk anything about Cooper and his hair at all in the.
Well, that's because in the beginning of the book, I do a very funny thing about theories, and then obviously I couldn't come back and give any theories after I do my joke about theories, and I didn't want the book to be that. This book is not about theories. This book is about art. That is really what this is about. How they did it, the art that's out there, and how it existed in that time. That is what this book covers.
And you as a fan, I mean, and you as a fan, which I think a lot of us who are fans of Twin Peaks can probably relate to and stuff, that how Twin Peaks has touched us and helped us through our lives and stuff.
Right. I mean, to me, that's the point. Because, if I pick a theory, and honestly, I don't have one about Fire Walk with Me anyway. I think I never thought about this, but it might be Lynch's most straightforward film. I mean, it pretty much is what it is, really. Right. So
right underneath Straight Story, right?
Yeah.
Straight Story. Well, and both of them, Sweeney, right? Sweeney's involved with them.
I was really hoping that me and Mary were going to be buddies and I was going to get to do like a full-on Straight Story interview with her. But I mean, maybe she's just busy, but I haven't, because
she's better than us because we've reached out to her and I don't think we've gotten a response back. So you got more than a response. You got an interview, and an excellent interview that I would recommend everybody check out.
Well, I appreciate both of your kind words and, as always, your kindness to the community. And I can't believe I'm on the last episode ever of Twin Peaks Unwrapped.
That's right.
It's always our last episode.
Point, we are retired. We are done.
Officially retiring again.
Done. I will say though that Scott, thanks to you, I think we have like the Red Room podcast model more. I mean, we don't feel like we have to be out every single week if we want. If we want to do something for our show, we can do it when we feel like it. And I think you've been telling me that for years. And
I have.
for us, it was kind of like, no, people forget about us. We have to be out every single week.
It's really funny because I told my son that I was going to be on your guys' show, and he doesn't give a damn about Twin Peaks at all. But he said, well, didn't those guys quit? Didn't you have to do like some big whole thing where you edited together a bunch of actors to say goodbye to them? And I was like, yes, as a matter of fact, I did.
Yeah, you did.
For reminding me. I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah, it was great.
And it took forever to go through all that stuff. And then you guys don't even quit.
No, we don't.
But this time we really are. This is really the last show.
You know,
we couldn't end the series, the whole podcast, without covering your book.
Right. We actually held on just for your book. Yeah. It's so funny. Ben had an idea because we were like, well, we'll put one out maybe once a month or whenever we feel the time is right, which has been working out. But behind the scenes, Ben and me were discussing about something. And the thought of that idea of what was being floated, I was just like, I can't go back to weekly. And then luckily Ben said the same thing to me. And I'm like, thank God, because I didn't want to be that guy. But I'm I'm on vacation. I want to enjoy stuff. Just week to week is just too much.
I think also there's people out there with a pandemic where they're quitting their jobs. They're realizing like, I don't want that. That's not, I mean, and it almost feels like how you came to a revelation, Scott, that like, this is not what I wanted. And so many people like that. I think for us, it was kind of like the same thing as like, I can't do that. I mean, it's too much. We did 6 years and I just can't do week to week anymore.
I don't know how you did it. I didn't know how you were doing it when you were doing it.
I don't know how we did it either. I mean, there were some weeks that were crazy.
And you guys got good guests and big shows and all that stuff. I mean, I always thought it was crazy. And I think, isn't it better? Like when you have something to say, you come back, you have a platform for it. I mean, it's the same with the Blue Rose. The first year we did 4 issues. I mean, obviously we're trying to start. And now I think 2 a year seems about right for it anyway. So that's what I think it's good for Courtney and John and I to, because I'm sure you guys miss each other. Like I always tell Courtney, I miss you when we're not working on an issue because you're going back and forth and you have the fun of talking about it. But also it's a shit ton of work.
Yeah.
It's true. It's special. It's special these times that we come together. It's so good to have you on the show, Scott. And I mean, I'm so impressed with what you've done. I think I texted you. You should make more Twin Peaks books. This should be the first of more. I'm sure there's more that you could do. What is, if not Twin Peaks, what do you have any thoughts about your next book?
Oh, do you? Yeah, I'm working on my next book now. I'm really excited about this book. It is, the working title is The Last Decade of Cinema, the 1990s.
Wow.
So there was no more cinema after the 90s?
Yeah, so my problem with my books that I see, and feel free to edit this out because maybe no one cares, is that my books have been too nostalgia based and not piss you off enough. So I'm coming up with this idea that the 90s were the last year they made good movies, and there's been no good movies since September 11th is what I'm going to really write about. That September 11th ended artists making risks in film.
Wow.
And so what I'm doing is I'm picking 2 movies from each year in the 90s, from 90 to 99. And I'm doing interviews. That's why, like with Natasha Gregson, she was in a movie called Two Girls and a Guy. That's one of the movies I'm focusing on. So I also interviewed her about that. And I'm kind of showing how I'm picking movies that took risks and were adult, and there's no superheroes in any of the movies I'm picking, but they're entertaining and they're adult, and I'm focusing on those. So right now the working title is The Last Decade of Cinema. I want something that kind of pisses you off when you see it and makes you say, that's not true. Here's $25, you jerk.
I want to read this book already. Sign me up. I mean,
because you're so wrong, Scott.
It's a whole other podcasts we could talk about because
Well, I'm sure I'll be
fascinated
back.
by
I'll
Yeah.
be back on your last show.
Our
last show.
yes, our last show.
And we gotta start thinking about that last special show that we'll
Show.
do for the end of the year special
Yeah.
thing.
It never ends. Never ends. All right.
And I'm sure we've said this a million times, but thank you, Scott, for always
thank you.
doing these special the Christmas holiday shows, and that always makes it so special. And you're so funny. And I do get people who say, it's like, when is Scott going to be on again? And he's so funny. And I do get people who just love when
It
you're
is
on
funny
there doing
because
that.
I get people who will they'll ask me a question about if the Blue Rose is here, are they subscribe? And then they always say, like, I hear you on Twin Peaks Unwrapped. So, I mean, people obviously are listening and we appreciate being jackasses. So.
So, Scott, before we let you go, let everybody know where they can find you on social media, where they can buy all the books on social media, all that stuff.
So my personal Twitter is at Scott Luck Story, and then there's also at Blue Rose Mag 1 for Twitter. And then on Instagram, I'm Blue Rose Mag, and I'm posting a picture every day from Fire Walk with Me. I'm up to I don't know, day 75 or whatever we're up to, but it's going all year long to celebrate Fire Walk with Me. You can subscribe to the Blue Rose at bluerosemag.com. Pick up any of the books either there or FayettevilleMafiaPress.com, and we have a lot of exciting books coming out, and if you have ideas, let us know because we're always open to it, and it's a dream come true. I'm very lucky, and I know that this happens because your listeners support the work that we do, and we really appreciate it.
Everything mentioned on today's show is in the show notes. So please subscribe to us on iTunes. We're on Google Play. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on the Twitter. A comment, a question, or theory about today's show, give us an email at twinpeaksunwrapped@gmail.com. And we'll be back maybe in a
Never.
Or
This is
never.
it.
Ne-
Goodbye.
This is last
Thank you for
episode.
having
We're
us.
done. We're done.
Maybe we'll see you in a month.
See you in a month. Maybe. Goodbye.
Coffee time.